Bit tuning is a mystery to me. And it's not because I don't know what's going on. I know the intent is to get a fairly responsive quad or an extremely responsive quad at the risk of burning your motors. But all of these videos that Chris Rosser puts out or Joshua Bardwell puts out, they try as much as they can to simplify the concepts and ask you to move the sliders from left to right in beta flight and just basically try to get you to go test it out. Your quad, do a few flips, a few rolls, and try to get the sharp responses to translate for the actual gyro to track the set points. They use all of these terms and trying to get you to understand the fact that in order to get a really good quad, you need to have it tuned. But what does actually tune mean? What do those numbers that you put into beta flight, how does it actually translate into the responsiveness of your quad? So I thought that I would just try to delve back into the past 22 years ago when I actually attended control engineering and try to see what does PID actually mean. So let's look at how a closed loop actually works. What does proportional, integral, and derivative actually do when you play around with the remote control sticks? What does it do to the quad, and how does it change the response? Stay with me and you're going to learn something today. Alright, so we're going to start off to explain what is a controller. Please I apologize for my handwriting and my drawing skills, okay? A controller actually does corrections on the input signal to reach a steady state. Okay, so that is very important because what it does actually, it's not trying to get to the perfect signal. Whatever the constants that you give it in order to control that reaction of the signal, it tries to get it to a steady state. What does steady state actually mean? So let's talk about the signal, okay? So when you actually want to tell the system to do something, let's say for example you're trying to tell a car to go to 50 miles per hour. 50 miles per hour, that is your set point. Okay, so when the system tries to react, it then can't just immediately go to 50 miles per hour. It just can't do that. So what it does actually, it starts to rise. So when it rises, this between this point and this point, and between here to here is your rise time. And then it tries to get to that set point, then tries to achieve finally getting to that. This is what we call the steady state. So the steady state might actually be somewhere like this, that, right? So it's steadying here, or it could be like that and steadying there. Alright, so the controller tries to make those corrections in order to try to get to your command, but try to get a state where it doesn't necessarily match your command, but it is at equilibrium. Okay, so for our controller, what do we actually want to do here? So I just want to explain in a quad. So you have this quad, right? So propellers there. So on the propeller, on the quad itself, it has what you call this gyro. So this gyro actually senses the speed, the angular speed of the gyro moving. So for example, right now, if the gyro is moving extremely fast, according to the rates that you specify for it, it is, for example, 800 degrees per second. So if a full circle is 360 degrees, so it's moving slightly more than 2 circles per second, right? It's just like RPM, but it's trying to just explain it in degrees per second, okay? So but the gyro itself doesn't turn anything. What turns actually is the motors. So when the signal is given to the motors spin faster. So if it wants to do a flip, the side that actually wants to flip, for example, you're trying to flip to the right, so this then goes faster compared to this, compared to the one here, it goes slower, so then it flips, okay? But it actually gives an electric signal then speeds up the motors, and when it speeds up the motors, there are many external factors. You have the wind, you have the inertia of the you have the inertia of the quad, you have the difference of the center of gravity, right? And then you have the the bias of the motor. So the motors want to turn a certain way, and it doesn't spin immediately, right? So all of that, with all the other factors I'm not going to name through, contributes how the actual gyro reads the speed. So if you wanted to achieve 800, you give a signal for 800, it doesn't mean you get to 800. And okay, so that's the basic concept right now. The quad doesn't necessarily immediately react to what you achieve, what you actually want to achieve. So, but the way the quad actually works is through the flight controller. So what you actually give to it first is your input, and this input is your remote control input, okay? So it goes into this sensor, but in this right now, I'll just call it E. I'll explain to you a bit what that is, okay? And then it goes to your PID controller. So here, let's just put a box, PID. So P, as you know, is proportional, I is integral, D is derivative. For the purpose of this particular segment of the video, we're not going to focus on I and D, so let's assume this is just a PID controller, sorry, a P controller, proportional controller. So even though it goes into this adder, so if you remember calculus, that is the symbol for adding. So adding, because we don't have the I and D portion, or we turn off the I and D, so right now you only have a proportional controller. So it goes to the system, which is the motor, and inside the system you actually will then have a sensor, which is the gyro. So the gyro then measures what did the system actually input the motor. The gyro then doesn't measure the speed of the propellers, it actually now measures the speed of the quad turning. So therefore this number might not match what you're actually inputting, so now it goes here. So here, this box right there is what calculates the error. The error is then the gyro minus the RC input. So the output here then is actually error. Sensor minus RC equals error. So error is the one that is fed back. So feedback loop, that's how we call feedback, then goes into the PID controller again. PID controller again makes the correction, goes to the system, it either speeds up or slows down the motor, and then the sensor reads it again, and it just loops over and over again until it reaches steady state. Okay, so let's now talk about the actual reading, the theoretical reading of what's the gyro and how it reacts against the PID, or the proportional portion of the PID. Okay, so now let's have that as the graph of the gyro. Okay, for the gyro, we want to achieve 800 degrees per second. Okay, and at the same time we have another register which calculates error. And error, if you recall, is gyro minus set point. So set point is we set it here. Okay, all right. So now we're just moving the sticks, and when we move the sticks, the motors speed up and wants to make that turn. Right, so it starts from 0 here. Okay. So now remember that loop, it loops back into the gyro. The gyro measures what it's actually reading, and this is not 800 because it's just starting out, right? So what the error will actually be then is this portion. This is error. Okay, and that error is now here. Okay, so it doesn't take 1-to-1 because the equation for the proportional control, so right now this is error. So when you go down to proportional control, the equation is k of t times e of t, where e of t is error. So in the case where you already sense this error, which is the difference between the gyro and the set point, if k of t is 1, then the proportional control will put back exactly the number 1. But let's say k of t equals to 10 and error, let's say it is still 790 degrees per second. So then proportion is k of t equals 10 times 790 equals 7900. So basically then you can see it's actually giving a huge boost to the motors. That's what happens. Okay, so because the 10 number 10, I just picked it up, but right now you can see it's basically just boosting the error. So when it gets fed back to that loop, so remember that loop again, from error goes to PID. So in this case, you only have P. It goes to the system, it goes to the gyro, okay, and then it feeds back here. So now it's boosted. So when it's boosted, the red, which is the gyro, the signal is boosted. So it now goes back to the gyro, and then gyro measures, it goes upwards. Okay, it's because, and you remember, even though you boost it hard, it's not going to react immediately because of all the inertia and all the resistance that it sees, but it is going to go up. And then this motion repeats itself, right? It calculates again what the error is, and then now the error has reduced. The error has reduced here. The proportional control times the constant is now like that. So then goes back upwards, goes upwards, okay, the slope changes, all right, and then it calculates again what the error is, and you have the error, and then it's boosted like that, okay? So eventually what will happen is, if your k of t is large, then your boost is large. So what happens then, right now, the gyro doesn't know when it's going to stop, but the signal is telling it just go, 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 but with a less of, you can see the proportion is going out smaller because the error is smaller, but the propellers are still moving fast. So therefore, sometimes if the k of t or the boost is too high, it will then overshoot past the set point. Okay, so then what will happen is it reads that it has already overshot that way, and the error is negative, but then when it's boosted control, the proportional control is boosted, it goes with a large signal, it tries to pull it down. So it pulls it down again, and then it goes past, it reads what the error is, and then it goes back up, and it goes boost back up. So now you can appreciate with the higher boost number, what you will get is an effect of just going up, down, up. Finally, it will settle, but it takes a longer time to settle. And in our world, we actually do not want this. We do not want this sinusoidal wave, or basically what we call bounce back, or prop wash, or overshoot or undershoot, because you want it actually to track the set point. So this is not what we want. So when we want to get a little bit more perfect signal, that is where the integral and the derivative then comes in. Okay, so that's the end of part 1. So we've learned about proportional. Go to my next video and we'll learn about integral control.